create an image where we have a couple of guys in a dinghy, a little rowboat, rowing out to an old uh, sailing ship, a galleon, like a pirate ship or something like that. And what we're going to try to do here is come up with some ideas and come up with a composition that would work well. And so the first thing I would do is go to the internet and start looking at pictures like this. So I've pulled some pictures here of dinghies or little rowboats. Now, if it's something that you already are very familiar with, you may not need to spend a lot of time doing this. If you're not really a boatman or a sailor, or you haven't had much to do with sailing vessels, this could be very helpful and very important. And what I found is just looking at pictures for a period of time, going through the Google images, you start to saturate your brain with these images, and you just start to get a feel for what a little boat like this would look like. Even though each one of these is a little bit different, this one's good reference because it shows you the size relationship of a man in the boat and how he holds the oars. Of course, little boats like this come in different sizes. So if I were going to do this, I'd actually gather pictures like this and actually many more to try to get a feel for this. Now, perhaps in the beginning, we wouldn't need to get too particular about details, just kind of get an idea. Sometimes what I will do as I'm studying my composition is I lay this little crisscross thing over here to find the exact center. You want to put your subject matter typically in the central portion of the screen, but not necessarily dead center. So these guys are just off center. And where you locate them around this says a lot. This person would feel threatened or intimidated if they're down here and you have all this space above them. If they're over here and they're facing this way, it looks like they're moving forward. Because that's the flow, if you have somebody facing the other way, what we're trying to say typically is that they're going against the flow. So they're experiencing conflict in their life. So I like to kind of check out where the center is. Another thing I'll do is I'll create where thirds are and kind of see where they are and how this breaks down for thirds. I'm also, and this is thirds vertically. So we see that the center of the focal point here between these two levers is right here at the corner of the central area. That's a good composition. I also like the idea of golden triangle, the golden rectangle type thing. We can get into that a little bit later. So oftentimes I will lay that golden rectangle over these as well. All right, we'll keep moving along here, and I've got a piece here. So going back to what we decided we were going to do here, our assignment, having this sailboat and a rowboat going out to it. What I want to try to do now, there's two reasons why we keep our thumbnails small. There's not a set size for a thumbnail. I like to work at about the size of a business card or the size of a driver's license or a credit card. That's a good size for me. I know people who have gone as small as like a postage stamp. It's a little bit too small for me. But there's two reasons why we want to keep it small. So bear this in mind as you decide what size you want to make this. The one is what we're trying to do here. Let me throw the one. I gotta find it here. Okay, here's my little thumbnail that I actually worked these up before, and this is one I like. when we put this frame around it, there we go, and we actually frame it in and white everything else out. So in the final, what we're saying here, but this thumbnail is in the final, that's what it's going to look like. And the whole point of this is trying to design this overall composition. We don't want to get into little detail, at least not at first. We want to look at the overall thing. Now, everybody has a tendency, and artists are no different. Everybody has a tendency to get sucked into detail. And by keeping this small, it's easier to think of the overall composition. It's easier to think of, without getting sucked into little ropes or little people or waves or anything like that, to think of this whole thing in a rather abstract way. How this darker cloud shape tends to frame in this area. How the light area over in this dark man's head kind of makes him the key, the central figure in this. And we were able to look at those more objectively because we're looking at the overall thing. If we allow this to get too large, and for me, if I start drawing this at 5 by 7 or 6 by 8 or something like that, I get sucked into the detail way too quick. So I'll be doing it, keeping it small. It allows me to keep focused on the overall picture, the general part. We haven't moved into the specific. We haven't moved into the details yet. We haven't moved into the little complexities. We're trying to look at this very almost abstractly to create the overall composition. That's one reason why we want to keep it small. The other reason is one of our biggest tools for being creative and making creative decisions is giving ourselves different choices. And it's just plain and simple. If we draw small, whether we're on paper and pencil or digital, if we keep it small, then we can work faster. And in the same period of time, instead of just drawing one thing, we can draw a bunch. And by drawing a bunch, now we have some choices. And we can start to pick out, well, which one do we like better? And that's the real power of the thumbnail. You notice I've got my frame up here. I can always move that around and decide where do I want to frame this. I can rotate the frame. And then typically I like to just draw with open borders like this and then decide where I want to frame that. And I can, I can come in, I can scale this up or back. I'm working in Photoshop, by the way, on a Mac. That's my preferred tool. So I can open up that frame or close it up. I can even rotate it if I want. And, to give it kind of a skewed, whatever I want to do, I can take snapshots. If I get something, oh, I like that, I can save it off here. I can, one of the things I like about working digitally is I can move all these things around. So for example, I've got all these on different layers. I can take this thingy that I've got here, I can move it over here. Okay, I can say, well, what if I flop this? I can flop it horizontally and have it coming in that way. So I can create, by keeping these on separate layers, I can create all sorts of different versions. And it's important to, gotta find the right thing here. It's important to play around with this and come up with as many different things as you can. Not only where you place them, but push some things, exaggerate a little bit. Say, well, what happens if I put this dinghy, make it really big, so it's now in the extreme foreground? What happens then? Well, I may need to go back here on this background piece and and draw it out some more. So I can see that, but I can play around with all sorts of versions here. I want to keep them small. I want to keep them quick and sketchy, all right, so that I can discover as many possible varieties as I can. When I think I'm kind of run out of ideas, then I want to try to force it and say, well, okay, um, basically the thing that's the same here with all these is the dinghies in the foreground and the big ships in the background. So therefore, I thought I had run out of ideas, but how about if I flip it the other way?